The wind clawed at the empty plains, a dry whistle curling through the skeletal remains of old fences. At the edge of a forgotten patch of Nevada scrubland, a rusted gate hung crooked on its hinges, moaning with every gust. Just beyond it stood a man, broad-shouldered, slouched with age, his hat casting a shadow deep enough to hide the worn-out stories etched into his face. Luke Remington had once ridden with the Bureau of Land Management, tracking wild Mustangs through miles of desert. Now, at 67, he moved slower, more like the ghosts of those horses than the horses themselves. But his eyes still held the desert fire, and they were fixed on something extraordinary. She stood alone in the corral, flanks trembling, coat a mottled blend of cream and ash. A rare Kiger Mustang, untamed, unbranded, and pregnant. Her breathing came in ragged huffs, nostrils flared as if trying to inhale all the scentless warnings riding the wind. The mare's name, if it could be called that, was Dusty, a placeholder scribbled on the intake sheet at the holding facility. But Luke had whispered another name to her, since he'd brought her here 2 months ago, Ember. He didn't know why he'd bid on her at the auction. Maybe it was the way she'd stared him down, as if daring him to turn away. Maybe it was the tightness in his chest when the auctioneer described her as too wild, likely not worth the cost of feed. Or maybe, deep down, he saw something in her that mirrored what he'd stopped seeing in himself. A flicker of defiance, a last stand in a world that had passed them both by. Luke adjusted his gloves and leaned on the corral fence. Ember turned her head slightly, eyes sharp and distrustful. She hadn't let anyone get close. Not the vet, not even Luke. But she hadn't run either. She just watched, patient and unrelenting, as if waiting for something none of them could see. "She's close," muttered the younger man standing beside him. Logan Briggs, fresh out of veterinary school, hadn't yet learned the rhythm of horses who lived wild. He relied on numbers, pulse rates, expected due dates. But Luke trusted something older. The air had changed this morning. He'd woken to silence, so complete it rang in his ears, like a warning bell. Ember's foal would come today, and it wouldn't be easy. "She hasn't laid down once," Logan said, frowning as he made notes on his tablet. "That's not normal." Luke didn't answer. He was watching Ember's belly ripple, tight with contractions, her muscles working through some ancient, painful process. Every so often, she'd paw at the ground and toss her head, but refused to collapse into the straw Luke had laid out that morning. "She's not normal," Luke said finally, his voice low. "You ever seen one like her?" Logan glanced at the mare and shook his head. "She's special. Her coloring, her build, it's textbook Kiger. She should have been picked up by a sanctuary or breeding program. How'd she slip through the system?" Luke didn't respond. That part of the story didn't matter now. What mattered was what was coming. Inside the barn, everything had been prepared for the birth. Clean water, surgical tools, blankets for drips. But Luke knew if Ember went down here, she'd do it on her own terms. She'd never accept their help, not unless she had no choice. He checked the horizon. Nothing but sand and sky. The quiet nagged at him. It was too still, even for the desert. Not a crow. Not a rabbit. The land was holding its breath. The first real contraction hit Ember hard. She staggered and let out a low, guttural noise, more growl than whinny. Logan flinched. "That's not good." "She's fighting it," Luke murmured. "She doesn't trust the ground. Doesn't trust us. Hell, she probably doesn't even trust her own body right now." Another contraction followed. This time Ember buckled to her knees, but sprang back up with a furious snort, eyes wide with panic. Luke stepped toward the gate. "Wait, what are you doing?" Logan asked. "She needs to know she's not alone. You can't go in there. She could kick you into next week." "I've been kicked harder by horses that loved me," Luke said, unlatching the gate. The air shifted again as he stepped into the corral. Ember tensed, ears flattening. Luke didn't move closer. He just knelt in the dirt, far enough to show respect, close enough to be seen. "I'm not here to trap you," he whispered. "Just here if you need me." For a long, breathless minute, nothing happened. Ember's chest heaved. Her legs shook. But she didn't bolt. And then she lay down. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't calm. She crashed to her side like a fallen tree, dirt kicking up around her. But she stayed down. And with one final groan of surrender, the birth began. Logan scrambled to grab the kit, but Luke raised a hand. Wait! They watched as the foal emerged, slick and trembling, a writhing miracle of legs and instinct. It took long minutes, each one carved from silence, but finally the tiny creature pushed free of its mother. The foal was alive. Even before it stood, even before the last of the afterbirth had hit the ground, Luke felt the tears prick the corners of his eyes. The moment wasn't his. It never had been. It was Ember's, hard-won and primal, a battle waged against biology and fear. The foal raised its head and blinked through the haze of afterbirth. Its coat shimmered gold under the fading light, but it wasn't the color that stopped Luke cold. It was the eyes, one brown, one a brilliant icy blue. A mark so rare Luke had only ever seen it once before. Beside him, Logan gasped. "Is that a chimera?" Luke didn't speak. His voice had caught somewhere in his throat. The foal took its first shaky step. Ember, still weak, nuzzled it close, her body trembling but protective. And then, without warning, Ember let out a scream that tore through the stillness like a bullet. Her head snapped up, ears swiveling. "What is it?" Logan asked, instinctively stepping back. Luke rose to his feet. Something moved at the far edge of the property. A shadow, swift and deliberate, ducking behind the outer shed. He knew that shape, that gait. His blood went cold. They found us. The wind surged again, carrying with it a storm of dust, and something else. The scent of fuel, the sound of distant tires crunching gravel. The foal let out a tiny, questioning cry, pressing into its mother's side. Luke clenched his fists. The birth had been a miracle, but whatever was coming next wasn't. Luke's boots sank into the dust as he strode toward the edge of the corral, his breath tightening with each step. Behind him, Ember stood with her newborn nestled at her side, the mare's body quivering between exhaustion and alertness. She didn't take her eyes off the darkened horizon. Neither did Luke. Logan caught up to him, tablet forgotten, the younger man's face pale beneath the brim of his cap. Was that a person? Luke nodded once, jaw set. Yeah, and not someone we want here. He unlatched the barn door and grabbed the old Winchester from behind the tack shelf. The rifle was clean but scratched, its wooden stock worn smooth from decades of use. Luke had used it once to scare off coyotes. Another time, a drunk rancher who mistook his land for a shortcut. But this felt different, more deliberate. "Do we call the sheriff?" Logan asked, hovering. Luke shook his head. "Not yet. If it's who I think it is, calling the law only makes things worse." He stepped outside, scanning the tree line. There wasn't much cover out here. Just patches of mesquite and the crumbled remains of a storage shed he'd meant to bulldoze years ago. That's where the figure had ducked. He raised the rifle, finger hovering near the trigger, but not yet resting on it. "Show yourself," he called, voice steady. For a moment, only wind answered. Then a figure stepped out from behind the shed, slow and calm, hands raised. He wore a leather jacket coated in dust, aviator sunglasses gleaming in the last slant of sun. His build was lean, agile, coiled with the kind of tension that comes from years of always watching your back. "Long time, Remington," the man said, voice like gravel. "Didn't think you were still out here." Luke's grip on the rifle tightened, though he didn't lift it further. "Didn't think you were stupid enough to come back, Cole." Cole Stanton smiled without humor. "Well, time makes fools of us all, doesn't it?" Logan's brow furrowed, glancing between the two men. "You know him?" Luke didn't look away. "Yeah, I know him." Cole shoved his hands in his jacket pockets. "Heard you picked up a mare from the government pens. Bred wild. Untraceable lineage. Thought that was odd. Then I heard she dropped a foal today. Rare type, even rarer eyes." Luke stayed silent. "I came to make an offer," Cole continued, his voice taking on a salesman's lilt. "Clean money. High price. No questions. Just hand over the foal." "You think this is a transaction?" Luke asked, stepping forward. "That foal's not merchandise, and you're not welcome here. You still playing cowboy justice, huh?" Cole's tone hardened. "I know what that foal's worth. There's a lab in Texas that would pay 6 figures just for the blood work. You could finally fix this place. You and I both know it's falling apart." Luke's hand moved, deliberate and slow, sliding the rifle over his shoulder. Not as a threat, but a statement. "This place might be falling apart," he said, "but I'd burn it to the ground before I let you take what doesn't belong to you." Cole's jaw ticked. "I'm not asking, Luke. I'm giving you a chance to walk away clean. We both know how ugly this can get." From the corral came a sharp, shrill whinny. Ember was on her feet again, ears pinned, body coiled. Her instincts, raw from childbirth, flared like fire. She knew a predator when she saw one. Luke took a slow step forward, body between Cole and the corral. "You so much as set foot on my land again, you'll leave with less than you came." Cole exhaled through his nose, pulled off his glasses, and locked eyes with Luke. They were pale and wolfish, void of apology. "I'll give you until sunrise," he said, voice flat. "Then I'm coming back. And you'd better decide what matters more, your pride or your life." He turned and disappeared into the dusk, boots crunching on gravel as the horizon swallowed him whole. Logan exhaled, shaking. "Who the hell is he?" Luke watched the distance a moment longer before speaking. "A trafficker. Genetic black market. Spent years pulling Mustangs off the range and selling them overseas for breeding. Got chased out by the feds 5 years ago. Disappeared into Mexico. I never thought he'd come back." That foal. He knew about it before it even stood up. Luke nodded grimly. That kind of money buys eyes in the system. They walked back in silence. The corral was darker now, the last of the sun gone. Logan switched on the barn lights, bathing the area in a warm glow. Ember flinched at first, but the foal, curious and stumbling, moved toward Luke. He crouched low, letting the young creature sniff his fingers. The foal's mismatched eyes blinked up at him with startling clarity. There was no fear yet, only wonder. "She's going to be special," Logan whispered. "More than we understand." Luke ran a hand down the foal's damp neck, which is exactly why she can't fall into the wrong hands. Logan hesitated. "We could hide her. Move her tonight." Luke looked at the barn, the fencing, the open land stretching for miles. There's nowhere far enough. Not with Cole's reach. He stood and turned to Logan, voice grave. "We protect her here. Tonight. No matter what it takes." Logan swallowed hard but nodded. "You lead, I follow." A heavy silence settled between them. Luke stared at the stars beginning to scatter across the black sky. He hadn't fought for anything in a long time. Not since the Bureau pushed him out. Not since the cancer took his wife. But tonight he would fight. Not for vengeance. Not even for pride. But for a foal who didn't yet know what the world was capable of. And for the mare who, against all odds, had trusted him. Inside the barn, Ember lay down again, her foal curling against her side. They were fragile, exposed, but not alone. Luke closed the barn doors gently, bolted them, and turned toward the old generator shed. There were traps to set, lights to wire, a rifle to load and position by the porch. He had until sunrise, and if Cole came back, he'd find out exactly how much fight Luke Remington had left. The night was cold and quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. Luke sat on the porch, rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the gravel road beyond the ranch gate. Every creak of the windmill, every groan from the old barn, stirred his muscles to tension. Behind him, the house glowed faintly with light, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote barked once and fell silent. Inside the barn, Ember shifted restlessly. Luke had checked on her 3 times already. Each time, the foal had been sleeping beside her, breathing slow and even, its tiny legs twitching as if already dreaming of the open plains. Luke had laid fresh hay, left water, even hummed low to soothe the mare. But he knew her fear hadn't vanished. It had only settled deeper, like a dormant flame waiting for the strike. Logan emerged from the house with 2 mugs of coffee, steam rising from both. He handed one to Luke and sat beside him. "The cameras are on. All 5. Motion sensors, too." Luke nodded. "Good." Neither of them spoke for a while. The coffee was strong and bitter, and the silence between them stretched comfortably, like two men bracing for a storm neither could stop, but both had chosen to face. Logan finally broke it. "You think he'll bring others?" Luke stared into the dark. "He doesn't like getting his hands dirty unless he has to. He'll test us first, gauge how desperate we are. But yeah, he'll bring someone." Logan's hand tightened around his mug. "We're not giving them up." "No," Luke said. "We're not." The hours dragged. Midnight came, then 2 a.m., then the faintest curl of mist settled over the fields. Every shadow looked alive. Every gust of wind through the barbed wire fence sounded like whispering threats. But nothing moved beyond the ordinary, until the crunch of tires on gravel stirred both men to their feet. Logan checked the monitors on his phone. East camera. One vehicle. Lights off. Luke stood and checked the scope on his rifle. That'll be him. The truck stopped just beyond the gate. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door creaked open and Cole stepped out, silhouetted by moonlight. He didn't shout. He didn't wave. He just stood there. Then another figure stepped out beside him. Bigger. Slower. Luke tensed. That's not one of his usual crew. Logan squinted. "You recognize him?" "No. But he's not just muscle. Look at how he moves. He's trained." Cole finally called out, voice clear in the cold air. "One last chance, Luke. Don't make this ugly." Luke stepped forward, rifle still low, but in plain view. "You showed up at my home in the middle of the night. That's already ugly." "You've got no reinforcements," Cole said. "No backup. Just that green kid and a bleeding heart for a wild horse. I don't want to break your legs, Luke. I just want what's owed." Luke's jaw tightened. "Nothing is owed. Not to you. Not to your buyers." Cole shook his head slowly. "You're clinging to something that's already gone. That foal. Do you know what kind of money it represents? Do you know what its genetics could mean for breeding programs? Cancer research? War horses? You're sitting on a gold mine and pretending it's a petting zoo." "She's not a resource," Luke said, stepping closer. "She's a life." Cole sighed, disappointed. "Then I guess we do this the hard way." He nodded once to the larger man beside him, who reached into the truck bed and pulled out a crowbar and a bolt cutter. Then he walked toward the gate. Before he reached it, the perimeter lights flared on, flooding the area in harsh white beams. Logan, crouched by the switch inside the porch, looked to Luke for a cue. Luke raised the rifle. "I take one more step," the big man said. "You gonna shoot me?" Luke didn't blink. "If you cross that fence, yeah. I am." The man hesitated, one foot planted in the gravel. The silence swelled. Then Cole's voice sliced through it again. "Don't be a martyr, Luke. You've got no idea what you're getting into." Luke's gaze stayed fixed. "I know exactly what I'm standing for." Suddenly, Ember's shrill whinny pierced the air. It was raw, defiant. The barn door rattled as she stomped, protective and alert. The foal cried out behind her, the high-pitched bleat of something innocent but unafraid. The sound seemed to strike something in Logan. "They're not just horses," he muttered. "They know. They know." Cole's partner turned slightly, his grip on the crowbar loosening. "Boss," he said under his breath. "Maybe we walk away." Cole's eyes flashed. "Don't get soft on me." The man looked back at the barn, his brow furrowed. "That foal's different. I felt it." Luke stepped forward again, voice low but commanding. "You hear it too, don't you? That sound isn't fear. It's a warning." Cole's partner backed up a step. "You said this was just another job." "And it is," Cole snapped. But the man wasn't so sure anymore. He raised both hands and stepped away from the gate. "You're on your own." Cole turned to shout something, but it was too late. The man was already walking back to the truck, tossing the crowbar to the ground. Luke kept the rifle trained on Cole. "You've got 5 seconds." Cole looked at the house, the lights, the barn. At Luke, steady and still. At Logan, quiet but resolute. Then he spat on the ground and backed away. "This isn't over," he said. "You'll wish you'd taken the deal." He got into the truck, slammed the door, and peeled off down the road, his tires throwing gravel like sparks into the night. Luke and Logan stood in silence until the red taillights vanished into darkness. When it was over, Logan exhaled shaky breath. Do you think he'll be back? Luke lowered the rifle and looked toward the barn. Probably. But next time we'll be ready. They walked together toward the barn, the tension draining with each step. Ember nickered softly as they entered, her eyes meeting Luke's with something he couldn't quite name. Trust, perhaps. Or gratitude. The foal stood, wobbly-legged, and moved toward him. Luke knelt down again, let the little creature nose his jacket. You've started something big, he whispered, and I'll see it through. Outside, the wind shifted. Morning wasn't far now, but the war for this life had only just begun. The rising sun painted the horizon in soft gold, spilling warmth across the fields and washing over the barn as if to cleanse the memory of the night before. Luke stood at the doorway, one hand resting on the weathered post, his eyes fixed on Ember and the foal nestled at her side. The night had changed something. In them. In him. Ember hadn't slept. Neither had he. The foal, delicate but strong, had learned to stand, to wobble, to cling to its mother like breath itself. Luke had watched it all unfold with the silent awe of a man who'd nearly forgotten what it was like to witness beginnings. In the barn's quiet hush, with only the low, rhythmic breathing of the horses and the occasional shuffle of hooves on straw, Luke finally allowed himself to smile. Not wide, not proud, but real, tired and worn and threaded with something close to hope. Outside, tires crunched over gravel. Luke turned sharply, spine tensing. It was a sheriff's cruiser. The door creaked open, and Sheriff Dana Hill stepped out, her tan uniform crisp, one hand resting loosely on her belt. She was in her 40s, straight-backed and fair, with lines at her eyes from years of squinting into trouble. Luke walked out slowly, leaving the barn door ajar. Ember nickered softly behind him. "Morning," Dana said, scanning his face for signs of last night's storm. "You're late," Luke said dryly. Dana gave a small smile. "Didn't know there was a deadline. Got your call, but I wanted to give it some air. Figured you could handle yourself, and from what I saw down the road, I was right." He said nothing, just waited. "Cole's truck was found torched in a creek bed 6 miles from here," she said. "Empty. No sign of him." Luke didn't blink. "Figures. Neighbors called in about gunshots. Saw headlights cutting across your field. Said you were shouting." "Not shouting," Luke said. "Just telling the truth loud enough to be heard." Dana raised a brow. "Want to tell me exactly what happened?" Luke gave a small nod and motioned her to follow him into the barn. She hesitated, then stepped inside. Ember shifted when the sheriff approached, but didn't retreat. The foal, bright-eyed and steady now, stood close beneath her, its coat still bearing the shimmer of new life. Dana let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be." She was carrying something more than just a baby, Luke murmured. She was carrying a reason. Dana studied him. "You said Cole tried to take them?" "Tried," Luke confirmed. "He thought the foal was worth a fortune. Came in wild, like he owned the place." "And the shots?" Luke met her gaze. "Warning shots. High. Wide. He got the message." Dana exhaled. "You know I should bring you in for questioning." "You know I won't go." They stared at each other in silence. Two people carved from different kinds of duty. Then Dana nodded. "Let's call it mutual understanding. But you'll keep me posted. Any more trouble, I'll bury it." "Luke," she said gently, "don't." He looked away. "I won't have him come near them again. That's a promise I've already made." Dana lingered another moment, then gave a subtle nod. "I'll put out a quiet word. If Cole shows his face in this county again, I'll know." As her cruiser disappeared down the road, Luke leaned on the stall rail, staring at the foal. It blinked at him, long lashes trembling like it understood far more than it should. "You saved her," he whispered. "Your mama might have carried you in silence, but she carried fire too. And now you're here, breathing it." He didn't know why, but the words felt necessary. Maybe they were more for him than for the foal. That afternoon, he set to work, not because there was anything urgent, but because his hands needed to move and his mind needed to settle. He patched the fence where Cole had driven through, cleared out the storage shed that had gone untouched for years, and oiled the tack that had long hung unused. Each action tethered him back to the man he used to be. He noticed small things too. Ember was less guarded, more open to his touch. She let him brush her flank while the foal suckled, even turned her head to watch him, like she was no longer afraid of what he might do. Trust was being born as slowly as the sunrise. Evenings were the hardest. Stillness had a way of drawing out memories like moths to a lantern. He'd sit on the porch with his coffee going cold, listening for sounds that weren't there. His daughter's laugh, his wife's footsteps, his own voice saying something soft to fill the space. Instead, there was Ember's soft whinny and the foal's playful snort. One night, as stars freckled the sky and the barn light glowed like a beacon, Luke sat by the stall, legs crossed on the straw-covered floor. The foal approached, curious, cautious, and nudged his boot. Luke chuckled. "You don't know it, do you? That you were the thing I didn't know I needed." The foal bumped his knee with its nose, then darted back to Ember, who simply blinked, serene and still. That was the night he gave the foal a name. "Phoenix," he whispered, like the word held centuries. "Born out of fire and still here." Time passed, not in great leaps, but in steady ripples. Phoenix grew fast, spirited and bright. Luke taught him to walk beside a lead, to accept the touch of a brush, to respond to a low whistle. Ember watched it all, her body thin again but her eyes vibrant. The ranch was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. Then one morning, as Luke opened the barn door, he saw the envelope. No one had come up the drive. No tire marks. No footprints. Just a plain white envelope pinned to the barn wall with a rusted horseshoe nail. He plucked it down and opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, Ember in her wild state, standing proud on a distant ridge, and scribbled on the back in black ink, "He's not done. You better be ready." Luke stood frozen, the morning sun at his back, casting a long shadow across the barn floor. Phoenix neighed behind him, and Ember stepped forward as if sensing the chill that had entered the air. Luke clenched the photo tight, heart pounding not with fear, but with purpose. "Then let him come," he said softly. "If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to hear more just like it. Because out here, in the quiet places where horses run and hearts remember, there's still stories worth telling."